Afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 31st of March meeting of Powys Governance and Audit Committee. Welcome to all members of the committee and officers, and also to any guests that are with us today. I'm going to start with apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Chris Walsh, who is otherwise engaged on committee business, and from the Chief Executive and from Elnid Lovell. I'll move on now to item 2, disclosures of interest in connection with this agenda. So if there are anyone has any members who have anything to disclose in connection with this agenda, could you raise your hand and let the meeting know, please? I'm not seeing any hands, therefore I will assume there are no disclosures of interest. In which case we will move to the minutes, agenda item 3, and we will take first the minutes of the 20th of January. I am going to seek points of correction, clarification and matters arising as we turn the pages. So please raise your hands if, as we turn the pages, there is anything that you want to raise or clarify. Where items on the agendas, on the minutes, apologies, where there are items on the minutes which are otherwise dealt with on today's agenda, we'll deal with them under the agenda as opposed to in the minutes. So focusing on the 20th of January minute and turning the pages, I'm going to use the numbers from the big numbers from the pack. So that's page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm keeping an eye to see if there are any issues, any hands being raised. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Anything on the minute of the 20th? If there are no questions on the minute of the 20th, please could the committee agree that I can sign the minute, please? Anyone?
Opposed, Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. Moving on to the 9th of February. I'll turn the pages using the big numbers from the pack. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 31, 2, 3, 4, 35, 36, 37, 38, and 39. If there are no comments or questions in connection with that minute, I'd be grateful if someone could propose that
Opposed, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham.
Second.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. We'll the action log win to discuss the committee action log, which will be presented at the meeting.
Yes, Chair. Bear with me just 2 seconds.
I think the idea really here, Win, is do members find it helpful, and are there any suggestions?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You'll be aware I sent out an email to you which I hope that is now appearing on screen shortly. Can you see it?
Yes, it's up when, yeah.
Good. There we are.
Got it,
So
Wynne, thank you very much.
that's the new tracker that we've developed in-house. This is the informal tracker. There's also a formal tracker. And you only made some recommendations recently in relation to the risk report. So if I just click on the big bar there, hopefully once it sorts itself out. Well, if not, bear with me. There we are, that's better. So you'll actually get the number of items, open and closed items, etc. on there, and you get the detail underneath. If you want to look at it in great detail, if you go to the right corner here, just above it, if you click on there, you'll get the full page one version. So what I was hoping is that at the meetings, if you will look through this at your leisure, if you're happy with the closed items, that's fine, we can put those to bed. Then all I need to show you is the open ones at each subsequent meeting, and work our way through them if there's anything you want to raise on any points going through.
Thanks very much, Wynne. Are there any comments or questions for Wynne on the proposed tracker? Please, hi, Councillor Graham. Councillor Graham, are you on mute?
Sorry.
Councillor Gareth, terribly sorry, I'm all muddled up.
That's all right. That's no problem. Yeah, just for clarity, who signs these off, and when we get to that point? So obviously there could be things signed off. Are we able to scrutinise why they're closed off at that point?
Yes, absolutely. It should be you as a committee that signs these off formally to say, you know, I can close things as an officer, but at the end of the day, I want your endorsement to say, yes, we agree with your position on that one, or no, it ought to be reopened because whatever reason. And it ultimately, the responsibility is yours. It's your tracker.
Yeah, I was just thinking, is there two parts here? Because obviously an officer would have to come to the point to say they're proposing to close it. So do we need two parts within that? Ones that are ongoing and ones that are proposed to be closed, so we separate the two?
Yes, and we can
discuss
show
the next meeting.
Yes, and we can show you which are closed, and then we can just go through the list. And if you're happy with those, once you've had time to look at them, I think then we can just say, yes, that's fine. Anything that needs to be changed, we'll note it and change it, and keep it in the live system and so on.
Would that cover your point, Councillor Gareth?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's just one of those, obviously, going from meeting to meeting, items being closed. It's just obviously we need to just make sure that we're happy they are closed.
Yes, absolutely.
Or if we just need to ask those extra questions and give that support to the officers then, or support the officers if we want them reopened.
Yes, absolutely.
Indeed. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
When
Yes.
I can't find it. I can only find where it's got the guide to the informal tracker, and I've got the full. If I put the info,
If you click
the
on the
scrutiny
formal
tracker, the other one doesn't bring that up, which is what I've been looking at.
right,
It brings up. Hang on, where is it? Sorry, I'm looking at it on my phone because I can't get them both on my laptop. Okay.
It's probably better, Ange, to go onto the intranet and look at it at your leisure. Click on the link in email and open it on your laptop.
It's only the one that when I click on it's only got a formal security tracker and a recommendation tracker. It hasn't got an informal one on mine somewhere. I haven't been able to find. I didn't know there was two. If you get them, what I mean.
There are. I've only sent you the link to the informal at the moment.
Yeah, but it doesn't bring that what you had on your screen up when I press on the informal.
Hang on then. Let me.
It brings up one with lots of circles and green and red on it, which is the scrutiny tracker, but it's not that one. That doesn't come up on mine at all. But maybe you can find it for me later.
Yes, that's fine. Let's have a discussion
thanks.
outside.
But I just wanted you to know that I haven't seen that. That was
That's
all.
fine. That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
So on the basis of what Wynne has been able to show us today, and albeit I appreciate Councillor Ange, you haven't been able to have a good look yourself, other than what Wynne's been able to show us today, are we broadly content, subject to what Councillor Gather said about being assured that the work has been done, or in respect of closed items, are we content to go ahead with this?
Yeah, I think so. I think it looks good from what I can see on the screen in front of me.
But obviously, Councillor Ange, you'll want an opportunity to have a little kind of,
Well, a more in-depth look, but I
Yes.
can see what it's meant to do and what it's doing. And it's good in that way. It's much better than what we've had before. Let's put it that way.
yeah, thanks. And so let's proceed with this, subject to Councillor Gather's comments about closed items, and when I think pass our thanks to the team that have developed this, because I think it's a real step forward, as Councillor Ange has suggested.
Good. And you should be able to access it live at any point in time with that link. Once you're on the internet, you should be able to see it. As we update it, you'll be able to see it.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Wynne. If everyone's happy with that, I'll move us on to item 4, corporate fraud and error, the Q4 report. Yvette's going to lead on this item, but before we move on to that, can I just encourage all presenters of papers in the meeting to assume that all colleagues and members have read the papers. So please don't feel that you need to go through each of the papers on a page by page basis, but please point out the key points that you wish to draw to the committee's attention, and ask the committee what you want from them, but assume that members have read the papers. So on that basis, I'll pass over to Yvette to lead us on item 4, corporate fraud and error.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As you kindly explained, everybody will have read these, but I'll just sort of update on things that were outstanding from the last report, and also to report on hopefully a little bit more good news. Our figures have increased again since the paper was actually drafted, just to let you know that on the overpayments gains, where we've rebilled people, where we found fraud and error, there's an additional just over £409,000 to add to that figure. And on the income gains, we've also raised a further over £203,000 to the figure that you have in front of you, just to make you aware of that. I'll skip straight on then to the items that needed updating. Looking at the work with service areas who don't sign via the net consent, we've asked business intelligence to help us identify of the 650 users who hadn't accepted the policies, to try and track down whether these were still actually live employees, and we're still sort of getting to the point of trying to find out how many are live employees and which service area, and then we'll continue to address that. The e-learning fraud module, we've completed all of the work, and we've updated and personalised the module that we wanted to purchase, that we've had for the council. That's all been completed, and we've done all of that. We're just now waiting for the final thing, which is the Welsh translation, and then that will be rolled out as a matter of urgency as soon as we can get the translation. But appreciate everybody's busy, so we're almost there with that, so we're really happy with that. Fraud training for councillors, we're looking to do that hopefully once the e-learning module has gone out and such like, so that's all in hand as well. The internal audit we're looking at doing, this is now SWAP that we're talking about, fraud risk assessment for Powys. The work has been completed, as I'm advised, all bar in one area, which is yet to be sort of finalised and closed off. Moving on to the next page, the risk assessments and such like that we're looking to do with my team, that will follow on once SWAP's completed their work. And obviously, if anything is raised, you know, in the interim, people come to us, that's fine. Otherwise, we're planning a series of workshops with the service areas to work with them and identify where we have some issues to look at there. That will also be useful post the fraud e-learning module, because clearly people will have some questions, I imagine, for me once they've gone through those. The website, reviewing the fraud reporting, the external website, we've completed all of that, and we've added in now a fraud hotline, which has been live for a while, which is really good. It also has the facility to take answer phone messages if obviously we're out off duty at the time. The issue that we're still having, and it may be that you'll be able to do something to help us, please, is that on the intranet, we're told that we cannot have a report fraud button. And apparently that's immovable. So if there is anything that you can do to help us with that, we'd really appreciate that, because sometimes people like to be able to come internally directly that way as well. What else have we got? So so where are we? The fraud assessment actions, once they're all completed, we were looking to give Jane a twice yearly report on all of the emerging risks and identified risks and things like that, which would also inform of our forward plan for the next year. We've prepared one of those and submitted it to Jane, and just waiting final sign off for that, and pending also if there's anything that anybody here in this meeting would like us to consider for our work in the next plan, the next financial year. Staff and member codes of conduct that we were looking to try and get that brought in as well. HR were dealing with one side of that, and Gemma Gabriel is going to come back to me shortly on that side of it, with the declaration of interest policy and such like. And Clive Pinney is working on the members side, as I understand it, and he will come back to me once that's completed as well. I believe that's everything else that was waiting to be updated. So unless there's any questions, I'm very happy to answer if I can.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Yvette. I'm going to bring in Councillor Gareth and then Councillor Pete.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's just a question looking at some of the data and matching some of the high numbers of no further action and ongoing current cases and insufficient evidence, etc., etc. Looking at this, seems to be around the council tax reduction scheme. Has the department looked at tightening that up to try and stop any of the anomalies of that, because obviously it's creating workload? I'm just wondering, I know it's a little bit of a backward step, but obviously if that's not dealt with, we're going to have these ongoing issues for you in the fraud department.
Yes, that's a good question. Thank you very much. And the issue that we have a lot of the time with council tax reduction, rather than the council tax exemptions and discounts and so on, that people come now passported on universal credit from the DWP, which obviously we have no hand in, and they go straight on to council tax reduction then without us actually having a chance to assess at the front end and make any inquiries and checks. So we're very much reliant on then the awards team, you know, hearing or picking up something, because once they're on a passported benefit, they come straight into council tax reduction. It's a different matter when people are not on a Department of Work and Pensions passported benefit and they come direct to us asking for council tax reduction. We are then able to make many more checks. So unfortunately, it's one of those really difficult situations that is hard to manage because of the sheer numbers of people that we have that are on a passported benefit and come on to council tax reduction.
And so Gareth, do you want to come back on that? Your hand's still up.
You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, thank you very much. So that's really helpful to know and understand a little bit more of that, because obviously it's indirect fraud, I'd call it. It's not, and for me, it's, you know, trying to get that balance between what's fraud and what is indirect overpayments or on the wrong system, because obviously if someone comes across from universal credit and then they don't think about it and everything else like that, and then all of a sudden they get hit with a reclaim, it's going to have an impact on them and their quality of life as well, and surrounding. So for me, it's what can we do to try and obviously try to explain what we can do, but it's just making sure that we're not impacting residents indirectly by them making indirect false allowances.
Thanks very much.
Just, yeah.
Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks Yvette for the report and the presentation. And just I had sort of 2 points, if I may. I was looking in first of all section 3.3, where the 31 cases of fraud is proven. I couldn't quite see anywhere what the total overall cost of those 31 cases were, or what the lessons are that we've learned from those, and how those lessons have then been distilled into controls framework. And then I think just following on slightly from that as well, is in section 4 with at the time of the report, the 1.6 million of saved fraud. Again, I couldn't quite easily see in the report what is being done to prevent that happening again. But I don't know if that's what section 6.1 is trying to set out, but it was just a bit more, I guess, granularity around those 2 points to make it easier to see. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Peat. I had the very same question as you in respect of paragraph 3.3, so thanks for that. Yvette, can you help us here?
Okay, so we're talking about the fraud proven cases that's counted as 31 cases. You can see next to it the different numbers and the different types of cases against those. I mean, the council tax reduction scheme we've just talked about. We also do NFI matching that does match council tax reduction where people are claiming in different areas, maybe, or where they're listed at a different property for argument's sake, or they may be an employee, and checking that we've got the right payments, you know, the employee wages against them. So, I mean, you can see the list of all the different things there. The council tax discount and council tax premiums, that's the premium second home, obviously, that we talk about, or the partially occupied properties. Housing benefit cases. Now, these are put in there, you're probably all aware, if not, so let me just explain that some years ago, housing benefit investigation was taken back by the DWP. So we're no longer, as local authority fraud officers, able to investigate that. But we do joint working with the DWP where we both have an interest. So that's where the housing benefit side of it comes in. And it could well be that we've found issues with a council tax reduction scheme case that we've then found there is housing benefit payments as well that we have to joint work with the DWP. Business rates and the council tax exemptions, these are all part of our proactive work. So now these are areas that we've only taken on within the last couple of years within my team to be much more proactive about the reviews that we're taking and how we look at these. We do also need to do some visits to look at some of these properties as well when we're looking particularly for business rates or maybe for some of the exemptions. So it's a programme of ongoing work, but we are now in our third rotation of looking at these, and we had to go through a process of cleansing some of the data because the reviews hadn't been done within the council tax team because they were completely inundated with other work for some time. So we're right up to speed now. Our plan is that we will be doing more with business rates. And obviously, as we look at these, we look at them slightly differently because historically how proactive reviews were run was just a letter out to the customer and a response coming back in. And maybe when we had visiting officers, they would go out to some of these properties as well to identify if there was anything going on. But we actually use a host of other information and intelligence that we are able to gather to look at it from a wider perspective and we see then how things have slipped through, and then we are learning and building in tougher controls, you know, to stop it from happening again. So I hope that that kind of explains the overall costs that you're talking about. I'm not sure what you mean by that. The cost, is that in the cost of us looking at it, or is it in the costs of that we're getting back or that we're gaining? I'm not really sure what you meant on that part of the question, sorry. But the controls obviously come with us learning and doing more from this work and bringing it up into a much more modern day way of looking at things. And we've also improved the declarations and made it clearer to people, so they're absolutely, you know, crystal what they're applying for, what their responsibilities are, and what they must tell us and when.
Thanks, Yvette. Thanks very much. Councillor Pete, if I could just interject, what I was interested in, actually generally in the paper and in particular to this, I was interested in the potential values of everything in that table, what the potential recovery values were.
Yep.
But generally I was also interested in the cost of the cost of you and your team.
Yep.
Not to go into any detail on the cost of you and your team at the moment, but I think going forward it would be quite interesting to have information on the cost of the team relative to the value of recoveries, because I've seen it before when fraud teams have legitimately made a case for additional staff on the basis that they pay for themselves effectively, and you know, make a surplus for obviously for redeployment via recovery. And I was just interested in that. But I was also curious about the potential value of the items in that 3.3.
Okay, can I just say there that the gains and outcomes that you can read in point 4, where it shows the values there, they are the actual values.
Right, okay. Right, okay, thanks, thank you. Jane, you were going to come in there.
Sorry, my video wouldn't come on. Yeah, it's just to be mindful as well that some of those gains aren't necessary cash in terms of the council's budget.
Yeah.
They are, you know, preventing fraud. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily always money you get back, but it is what's being avoided from one of those benefit systems. So it's all adding value, but you don't necessarily always see it in cash terms.
No, yeah, thanks, Jane. Thanks for clarifying that. That's helpful.
Is it all right for me?
Councillor Pete, Councillor,
Sorry.
did you want to come back, Councillor Pete?
Yeah, if I may, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that, Yvette. I think just building slightly upon what the Chair and Jane said there is, I suppose where I was trying to get to is, yes, you've got 31 cases of proven fraud there, and I think building upon the comments is, it would be how much either fraud did we encounter, and I guess I think you might be saying to me that's in section 4, but I just wanted to check that. How much did we not suffer that we prevented? And I don't know, but you might say to me as well, that's also encompassed in section 4. And I think that was therefore just around my bit of asking for perhaps a bit more granularity, if it was possible to just see that going forward. And then I guess the other bit, yes, you talked a lot about all the work you've done, and yeah, very comprehensive, and thank you for that. I suppose then it was just whether that could be distilled into some bullet point formats, and where that has been put into procedures, extra controls or whatever, could be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Can I just come back a little bit and answer some questions on that? I mean, certainly the question of how much can we ever put a financial figure on what we prevent? That's difficult, isn't it? Because if things don't actually go into payment, then it's very hard to measure that. So from that point of view, but actually what Jane was explaining there in point 4 there, the overpayments gains, they are actual rebills that have gone out to people that we are seeking to recover. So we do expect to recover all of those. And as I said earlier on, we're in excess of, well, over 409 now on our target rather than the 370 that you can see there. The income gains, that is not always about a prevention figure. That could be that we've stopped somebody who's been getting £100 a week, let's say, for argument's sake, and then we use the old multiplier to show on average then what we'd be saving over a year. But actually it could be where we have found out somebody who has a holiday home, a second premium home that they should be paying the additional funds on, and they weren't. They were only paying the 100%. So the fact that we found the rest means that we are now actually going to be getting that money coming in as well. So I hope that gives a little bit more clarity, but I certainly take the points that it would be useful to show what we are doing in the way of improving controls and procedures and things. And I will make sure that that's brought to the next meeting.
So, thanks, Yvette.
Thanks, Yvette, and thank you, Councillor Peat, for your questions. All right, Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief, and just to thank Yvette for the excellent work that the team are doing with regard to corporate fraud in area. And I think there's one other avenue that we shouldn't lose sight of, and that's the deterrent value of an effective fraud and error team, because it does get reported in the press. There was an article this week reporting how effective they are, and certainly the deterrent value, well, that can't be measured. So thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Councillor David, and that is a point very well made. So thanks for that. Any further questions from the committee or comments from officers? I'm just going to mention one of my favourite topics, which I would quite like to understand what the authority's policy is, which is on deliberate deprivation of assets. I don't know if it falls within the fraud team's remit, but at some point it would be really helpful to understand what the policy is in connection with the deliberate deprivation of assets. And by that I mean people doing things with assets, mainly property, that they own to avoid social care charging and such like. Yvette, you were going to come in.
Thank you so much. Yes, we have dealt with cases of deprivation of capital, and exactly in the social care side, not just in the social care side, but yes, we have had a number of those cases over the years, which have been really successful. And it's usually because of intrafamilial financial abuse. So that is, we are picking those up, and we are working very closely with the financial assessments team, and indeed plan to do some work with adult social care on exactly that front. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you very much, because Yvette, that's great, because I've been asking about this for a few meetings now, so I very, very grateful for that assurance. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Martin.
Hi. The deprivation of assets for the social care is covered in the Social Care Act for Wales under sections 4 and sections 5. So there is an aspect around that in the current policy, in the All Wales policy, and it's also mentioned in our own social care policy as well. So, it's sort of picked up as part of the financial assessment process, but, where officers then become aware that somebody is abusing their position financially, that will then get referred to Yvette and the fraud team to see if it's very difficult to prove, I think, the fraud aspect, but there's certainly means and ways of us being able to recover money that people think they've hived off and hidden from us. And the same goes as, as Yvette has alluded to, where people have hidden capital, and that can be money or capital assets when they've been claiming various benefits, as historically we used to investigate housing benefit. That used to be one of the big things where people wouldn't declare that they got property or they had an inheritance and that type of thing. So, yeah. But
Thank
there isn't a specific deprivation policy. But I know that Steve Holcroft is covering this off, and so it has been mentioned to him.
Fantastic. I mean, that's really. I mean, I'm taking a good level of assurance from what both you and Yvette have said, and you know, if going forward consideration of a single policy document could be given, that would be really helpful. But it definitely sounds as though there is really good cross-working and high levels of awareness of that particular risk. So I'm grateful for that. So we were asked in the paper to advise. The paper was designed to advise us of the systems and processes at work and the current performance and activities. So I think we have we exhausted this item? I think we have had a really helpful report from Yvette. Are there any final comments on performance on this item? No, in which case I will thank Yvette and colleagues very much for her excellent paper, and for Yvette for answering all of our questions extremely helpfully. So that's fab. I'll move us on to agenda item 5. And James, are you leading us on agenda item 5?
Yes, I am.
Thanks very much, James. And same as before, assume that colleagues have read the papers, focus on the key business, the key things you want to draw to the committee's attention and what you want from the committee. Thanks very much, James.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, members. This is the Q3 report for the Treasury management activities of the Council ending the 31st of December 2022, in line with SIP for guidance. Bank rate, as everyone's aware, has continues to climb, so that as a benefit for us has allowed us to continue to earn money on any surplus cash we've held. We still have a significant capital programme, as you can see, with 42% borrowing, but we do expect that to fall a bit before the end of the year. The report includes updated capital financing requirement figures. Again, in this quarter, we've been able to redeem 2 for LOBO loans, totaling 10 million. There was a slightly increase in cost this year and next year, but it will give a discounted saving over the period of the loans there mentioned. PWLB interest rates are going up and down, so at the moment we're still doing some sort of 12-month borrowing, or perhaps 2-year borrowing until these rates settle down to a lower level. The financing cost to net revenue stream slightly up. The estimates here are slightly up on the beginning of the year, not substantially, but that's due to the increased borrowing rates we've encountered. There is further detail in this report on the sundry debt. So this is the updated position at the end of January, 19th of January, and there's further tables and charts further down breaking this up. There's the VAT KPIs and an economics update provided by Link. That was provided on the 31st of December, so maybe slightly out of date by now, but yes. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, James. So as a committee, we're asked to review the information in James's report and to seek clarification and questions and assess the effectiveness of the report and any actions and recommendations. I can see John's hand is up. John, would you like to lead the questioning, please? John, are you on mute?
That's better. So, my apologies. James, my question is on around the sundry debt and the still predominant issue here seems to be adult services, and within the adult services there seems to be something in there to do with the health board. To what extent have we managed to negotiate away the debt with the health board, and what is the residual problem there in adult services?
I'm not best placed to answer that. Perhaps Jane can answer that, please.
I haven't got exact figures, John, that I can give you today. We can give you some more information. Some historic debt has been resolved, which I think I made committee aware of in the past, and that will now have been written off. So these figures will be the live figures, and you can see that there is still a considerable level of debt that's over 90 days old. And there are ongoing discussions. I probably couldn't say too much around the detail there at this stage, but I can absolutely confirm that we are having regular discussions with the health board on their elements of the debt that's included here. And as you recall as well, that we're about to undertake a deep dive, and I've asked for some information to know when is that planned, when will that work be actioned, so that really adds some value here to the data that you see as well. So I can give you more information. I've promised to do that, but we haven't quite got it completed as yet.
Okay, fine. I'll leave it to the next meeting then.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Any other questions from colleagues? Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, it wasn't a question. It was just a minor presentational point, really. I just wondered in 1.1 as the opening, if it's really still relevant to refer to a 14-year-old bulletin. It just makes us look a little bit behind the times, and I wondered whether or not a phrase like in accordance with, rather than just putting the date in there. But I'll leave it to the author of the report.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pete. Thank you. Any other questions, please, from the committee or comments? I just wondered if somebody could comment on VAT recoveries. It still seems to be a bit of an issue.
Yes, there's quite a substantial amount of checks in place to make sure that we have the correct documentation to recover VAT. That's a safeguard almost for the council against if HMRC come in and do an actual check on us to say that we have actually been checking it, picking on errors. Whilst you can see on page 73, there's potentially correctable errors, and then we have other errors. The potentially correctable errors are, as mentioned, could be correctable. But I would safely say a lot of them could not be corrected. The services do have access to this on the finance system to see this is on a specific code to see what's being recharged. There's a bit of a delay there, as you can see, with the no signed authenticated receipt on the capital schemes. So where we make a payment to the supplier based on a QS amount. So we can see we've managed to reclaim everything this year and what we've done in last year. The other errors are VAT that's been reclaimed in error and should never been reclaimed. So that's what we've corrected to make sure that our accounts are correct. So a lot of this, as you can see, 20,000 is from purchase cards. That's a substantial amount, but they do remove a lot of cash from the authority. They do allow people to go out and buy with the cards at the right place, at the right time, without cash. So, there's pros and cons to this. Yes. We may be losing out a little bit of that, but we're also not opening ourselves up to such fraud and things like that.
No, I do appreciate that, James. Thanks very much for covering that. Are there any? Oh, Jane, you wanted to come in, Jane.
Yeah, just to add as well, as part of the training that we do, we look to reinforce the need to get VAT invoices, because every penny we need to make sure we can get back where we can. So that training is ongoing, and if we identify certain individuals that seem to have several issues, then we would chase that up personally. And we do have, in terms of purchase cards the ultimate sanction of actually removing the purchase card from them. So yeah, we look at all of those things. I mean, when you look at the values, they're not huge, and I think the value we get from purchase cards far outweighs some of these, but even still, it is about making sure we can recover every pound that we can.
Yes, I do appreciate that, Jane. Thanks very much for those assurances.
Just off the top of my head, there's about £1 million a month being spent on purchase cards. So
Right.
it's, you know, the figures we're seeing here are very small compared to the total amount that's going through correctly.
Yeah, thanks, James. And as you say, it's better than cash. Okay. Any further questions for James or Jane on the Treasury Management Report? No. Thanks very much, James. Thank you very much for all your work and for the preparation and presentation of the report. Much appreciated. I'll move us on to item 6, which is the SWAP internal audit planning report for Q1. And I'll ask Ian to speak to this paper. Same basis as before, Ian. Assume colleagues have read the paper. Draw out the key points that you wish us to consider and ask us, ask us what you need from us. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I put forward before you today the internal audit planning report, and that's on page 81 of the agenda pack. I guess the purpose is to ask the committee to approve the interim Q1 plan for 22-23. Internal audit is in essence about having effective plans in place to make sure that we've got sufficient coverage and using the internal audit resource to make sure that overall as a committee you get assurance that you're going to deliver your bigger priorities, your bigger corporate priorities. And so we use an agile approach in doing that. But in the longer term, we're looking to build assurances and long-term assurances and a bigger plan that link better to corporate priorities. And those corporate priorities are contained in your Stronger, Fairer, Greener corporate plan. And that's due to be released formally shortly. So what you'll see is we have an interim plan at the moment, and this plan is a holding plan until we get to that stage where we can produce a longer plan that will extend over a longer period, probably an extent beyond the 12-month period, that will have a clear linkage to your corporate priorities, a golden thread that goes through them all, and you will see us as an assurance provider showing how we're giving you assurance around those areas. It will show you other areas of assurance as well. So it will be basically the start of an assurance map, a basic assurance map. And also in terms of that planning process, we've spoken to a number of key personnel already in the council. We'll also speak to you as the committee and get your input in terms of what areas you feel are at risk and which areas you want to see have assurance around in terms of the greater delivery of the council's corporate priorities. So the Q1 plan itself, and that's on page 84 of the agenda pack in Appendix A, that is derived from some of the work that's just carried over from Q4. And that's the finishing of some of the projects that we have. So that's a small amount of time. There will be areas that were previously included in the pipeline. So they've previously been agreed anyway, and that pipeline rolls forward. And there's also some work that's in there being identified as a result of our liaisons with directors and heads of service. We've met all directors and we've liaised with all heads of service to get their input. And again, that input will drive into the bigger plan that you're going to see. So I ask committee to approve the interim Q1 plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'll open up for questions from committee members, please. No questions? So Ian and I have discussed previously, but I'm keen that as the plan becomes firmer in respect of, as Ian said, once we finalise this plan once our stronger, fairer, greener corporate plan has been finalised, our internal audit plan should align to the risk profile and the risks to us delivering our corporate planning objectives. I'm keen to see a plan going forward that enables us as a committee, and not just us as a committee, but more importantly the whole council, to see performance against plan and to understand what work was planned in 23-24, and to be assured that the planned work has been discharged, or indeed the plan has been changed, probably for good reason when it has had to be changed. And I'm also keen going forward to have in the plan clarity around the number of days that are allocated to delivery of the plan, and also to know if there are any unallocated days for priorities as they emerge. And page 85, Ian, of the big pack, it would be really, the planned work, it would be really good to have another column in there about how long you anticipate each of those pieces of work taking and what the dates and the time frames are. So I've got some ideas about further clarity on this planning, and in future I'd like the committee to approve the forthcoming year's internal audit plan during Q4 of the previous year, and I'm asking when to incorporate that into our work plan, so that when we actually start the financial year proper, we have an approved plan in place. So that's my thinking on the internal audit plan. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, apologies for missing the first substantive item of business. I was committed to attending a funeral today, which I did attend. I hadn't anticipated quite the timescale involved, so apologies for my late arrival, and also the possibility that I may need to leave for a school-related commitment before the anticipated end of the meeting. So double apologies. You've in fact raised a number of the issues with which I'd support you on, particularly in terms of having a better forward view of the overall planned activity for internal audit for the coming period. That seems to me it would give us put us in a better place to understand and evaluate what's in front of us if we could see what's coming up the track. I had a particular question for Ian, really, with regard particularly to the various funds, principally coming from UK government, some of which have come out in something of a hurry or with significant levels of sort of expectation and degrees of delay. We've got specific issues relating to levelling up funding and a couple of other initiatives here. I wanted to ask to what extent there's a link between the level of a priority that we bring to this in internal audit now and the level of scrutiny that was possible for the allocation of these funds previously, because I understand in some cases there's been a limited window for colleagues on the relevant committees to scrutinise the methodology with which we would allocate these funds. And is there a link there, and is it therefore a higher priority for us to go to town on our internal audit in relation to that matter? Is that somewhere reflected in our sort of risk awareness?
Yes, thank you, Councillor William. To answer that, I suspect all the pieces of internal audit work that we'd planned going forward were to support the delivery of those, and it certainly wasn't particularly looking backwards at the allocation. But I guess the way that budgets are set and the way that projects are managed and the way that business cases are thought about is part of the ongoing audit process that we would look at. And certainly, you know, we need to make sure that we are aligned up with any scrutiny functions that are ongoing around this as well, to make sure that, you know, we are all covering the, you know, the areas properly and we've got proper coverage. So I think my role in terms of those two projects going forward, and others like the Mid Wales Growth Deal, is a supportive role. It's about trying to make sure that those projects are successful and that we have internal audit work in place to make sure that if there are any issues, that the early warning signs are picked up at an early stage. So that's my role in that at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I've just very recently had some informal concerns expressed about the you know, shared prosperity fund in relation to the sheer speed that's been needed in shaping that up. And so I really welcome that emphasis on working in a sort of partnership approach to avoid difficulties rather than to be mopping up difficulties that have occurred that were avoidable. And it seems to me by far the best way to approach things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor William, and thank you, Ian. Jane, you wanted to come in on this?
Only briefly, in terms of some of those funds that you're speaking about that are coming directly from UK government, I just want to give everybody some assurance that in terms of the audit requirements and the evidence needed for those projects, they are very tight. And I work with my counterpart in Ceredigion with some of those funds are actually, you know, they are the lead on some of those funds, but we work very closely together as well, just to make sure that we're covering off all of the assurances needed. And I have a support role in that, although I'm not the 151 officer for some of those funds, but we do work very closely together on that.
That's good.
That's good to know, Jane. Thanks very much for that. Any further questions on Ian's draft plan? So Ian's asking us to approve this, notwithstanding the comments I made. My sense to the committee is that we ought to approve the plan as it stands at the moment, but with the expectation that going forward we will have an annual plan to sign off in Q4, and that there will be more clarity around days allocated, timescales, etc., so that as well as seeking assurance on service improvements made following internal audit recommendations, we can also have a sense of the performance against plan of our internal auditors, because I think those two things are equally important. So there are no further questions or comments. I will move us on to item 7, which our colleagues in Audit Wales are going to lead. And if colleagues remember, this was in a supplementary agenda pack, and there are 2 items. The outline audit plan in respect of the council and the pension fund. So Audit Wales colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take you through these reports. So normally this time of the year we would be preparing our detailed audit plan. We would have done a certain amount of planning and be able to bring to your attention those matters which we are required to report to those yourselves as those charges governance. So this year is not quite a normal year. There's two main reasons for that. We haven't done as much planning due to us not finishing off last year's audit until January when the powers accounts were approved and signed off, which is, you know, it was the same across all local authorities. It wasn't a particular powers issue. So we've started that much later. And we're also, there's a new requirement this year. There's a new auditing standard, International Standard Auditing ISA 315, which covers the new processes for identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement in the account. So this is an issue that all auditors are facing, public, private sector, England, Wales, wherever, everywhere. And so we're still very much getting to grips with that. So at this, we were not able to provide you the detailed plan at this time. So we've done this outline plan now. And we've done one for the pension fund, one for the main accounts, just to bring those matters, the things we can bring to your attention at the moment. The plan is then to do the detailed plan by July. Again, which is the same for all local authorities, or round about that time anyway. Which will have, all the more detail, the results of our risk assessment. So just a few sort of key messages just from this report as it stands. I mean, the responsibilities and the scope of our work remains unchanged from last year. The audit team, which is on page 7 of our report, is as per last year, or as per the audit finished last year. There's a section there on the fees and a link to our fee scheme, which was approved by the Senedd. So we're not in a position to confirm what the audit fee will be for this year. The fee scheme document, which is hyperlinked from the report, does contain some indicative fees and sort of fee rates by grade of our staff, so you can get some sort of idea. But until we've done our detailed planning, we're not in a position to confirm the audit fee. And then the timetable. So as I said, the detailed plan will be done in July, and we're working on the basis that we will sign off the accounts in November. Appreciate that this is earlier than last year when it was January, and there were specific issues there last year with new guidance coming out from SIP for very late, and there were just lots of issues anyway during the audit. Our aim is to get back to sort of pre-COVID timetables when we used to do it in September, get the audit finished off in September. It's not going to be, we're not going to be able to just jump straight back to September. We think over perhaps 2-3 years, we will work our way back to September. And again, I think this is a challenge that all public sector audit are finding, or local government anyway, trying to get back to the timetables sort of pre-COVID. I'd say that the pension fund report is exactly the same messages.
Yes.
The pension fund annual report has to be out by the 1st of December, so we're working to that end of November deadline to get the accounts signed off, so you can meet the statutory deadline for the pension fund. And I think that's all. Say it's a very high level plan, so it's not a huge amount to go through.
Thanks very much, David. I really appreciate that it's a high level plan, but and it's really helpful for the committee to know the direction of travel and the additional work that will be forthcoming in July. That's really helpful. Any questions? John, you want to come in, but Jane, are you adding to what David was saying?
Just if I may, Chair, just a little. I think it's disappointing that we're moving to longer timeframes, and that's not the fault of David and his team. It is where we are in terms of some of the new framework arrangements that will need to be factored through. We do seem to be closing the accounts for nearly half a year, and it would be very good to get them signed off much earlier, and I'm sure everybody would agree with that. We will still be looking to meet our earlier closing deadlines as a team here, even though it may be later by the time the audit team actually are able to make really good inroads into their work. But we will be looking to do to still meet the end of June deadline for ourselves in completing the work.
Well, that's really good to know, Jane. That's really helpful. John? Are you on mute, John?
Not now.
Got you.
Thank you, Chair. My question really is to Jane. I'm looking at Appendix 1 and the key changes to ISA 315. It seems to actually put a very much larger burden on our own resources. Now, I know we're pretty slim, and we're, I think also the Wales audit team are pretty slim as well. Is this practical?
It's the first year we've been working under this regime, so I think there's a lot of, I think We work very closely with our audit team to try and make it as smooth as possible. I don't think any of us are really clear as yet until some of that more risk assessment work has been done, exactly what this means. And I think that will be ironed out as we get through a detailed plan, but we'll have to wait and see, I think, is the answer to that, John. I can't say one way or the other, to be sure, at the moment.
Yeah, it just worries me that it seems an enormous change that would be taken all at once. And you know, some of the paragraphs here in this appendix will concern me greatly. We'll have to keep an eye on it anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
I think from an audit point of view, you know, it is quite a big change, and you know, it's quite onerous for us as well. It's and the audit sector in general. You know, I think there's been lots of, you know, sort of things in the press about ISO 315. I mean, it's all about, you know, trying to improve the quality of audit, and be more effective. I think ultimately, I think if you're potentially, it could mean less work actually at the end of the process, because if you're risk assessing and you are, you know, just then addressing the risks, you know, the actual work we do at the end when we get the accounts might be different, or even less. You know, it's until we've been through the process, we can't sort of make, you know, draw that conclusion, I guess.
Yeah, it worries me when I read terms like our teams may request different information or information in a different format from previous audits so that they can perform their audit duties. That sort of thing really worries me.
Yeah, thank you very much, John, for the question. I'll bring Councillor William in, but I think picking up on this, I think it would be helpful as we go along for both Jane and for the Wales audit team to keep us updated with what this is actually like for real once you start operating it, because, you know, I know resources are tight across professions with these kind of skills and expertise, generally, both within the authorities and within the audit teams as well. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up your point there and building on what on the concerns that John raised. What is the vehicle for us actually to bring these reflections to the relevant authorities? Whether is that the Adrian, the Auditor General, or does this need to be fed back to the Senate in some sort of review? I mean, obviously, there's not going to be any immediate change regardless of our experience, but we've got to communicate some of the unintended consequences that if they are as you who've contributed already fear, at some point, presumably after 1 year of operation, after the first annual audit. I don't know. I'm just interested as to how we would, because I think it's important that we put a marker down that we intend to feed back, particularly given the pressure on human resources, our end and with our colleagues in Audit Wales.
Thank you very much, Councillor William, for reinforcing that point. I mean, I think as David, correct me here if I get this wrong, but this isn't something that's unique to Wales or local authorities at all. So the likelihood of being able to change it is probably limited. David, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's private sector as well.
Yeah, this is, you know, this is it.
The big firms are battling with, you know, about this as well. So
everyone is obliged to do this and adopt this approach. But I think we do have a responsibility to continue to measure and respond to the impact of this on Jane and her team, and indeed the efficiency with which Audit Wales colleagues can support us and serve us. I think if in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, this committee's sense is that this is extremely burdensome, and we're not managing it in terms of resources. I think my first port of call would be Derwin, who's our engagement lead, to talk to him. I think if things manifest in the way that we're kind of fearful of, it would also be helpful to know what other local authorities in Wales are experiencing, and indeed the health boards and other public sector bodies. I think, as David says, we're not going to change this, but we do need to be cognizant of the impact that it has on teams, but that includes Audit Wales colleagues. Yeah. So I think, David, without diminishing this at all, and actually, we are where we are, and we're going to have to see how it works through, but keep a really strong eye on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, David. So we'll look forward to receiving the more detailed plans as and when, David, and thank you very much for that, for the discussion that you've enabled today. Much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the 2 debt policy papers that Jane and her team have provided for us, and these papers have been provided at the request of the committee, as we wanted to understand more detail in terms of debt policy recovery. So there's one paper on council tax and business rates, and there is a second paper on sundry debtors. So Jane, is there anything you want to add to the papers, or will we move to any questions from members?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember whether these policies actually did at some point come through audit committee previously. I think any feedback that we can get from the committee in terms of strengthening any of these, if you feel that's appropriate, will be welcomed. It's good to have that critical eye over policies like this. So yeah, they really are there for your information and feedback, really, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Jane. That's incredibly helpful. So any initial thoughts or comments? Martin, did you want to?
Yes.
I'll bring in Martin and then
Yeah.
I'll go to Councillor Pete.
If maybe I just give a little bit of background. Obviously,
Of course.
within income and awards, we're responsible for council tax and business rates.
Mm-hmm.
That is the one policy which has been written in line with the All Wales Council Tax Recovery Protocol in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we try and align to that as well. And then obviously we're responsible for the sundry debt side of recovery as well. And there's a separate framework, and I do apologise because that framework probably needs to be updated, given that certainly the right, whilst the process is the same, there's just an element in that report or in that framework that is around the write-offs, which was amended last year, so that there's increases as to who authorises those write-offs. But you can see from both frameworks, they're very similar, but they do differ. The council tax and business rates policies have an element where we go to magistrates court to create liability orders before we would push a matter to enforcement agents, whereas the sundry debt aspect, we pursue all matters of recovery and then push to an enforcement agent, but they don't have the same powers as they would have when they're dealing with council tax matters. So there is that difference. It's very unlikely that we don't often use enforcement agents on sundry debt recovery because there's very little powers. But they may knock on the door. They can go out and be the eyes and ears and sometimes capture some information that we may not have been aware of ourselves. So yeah, those are the 2 policies. As I said, the sundry debt policy does need to be revised. Okay, so if the sundry debt policy is revised, it would be helpful for the committee to see the revision and to know what changes have been made. Yeah, it would be more around the write-off provision and updating that in line with the council's new procedures. Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I could just call them first and second policies, because I can't quite remember what they were called from memory because I haven't got the screen up. So apologies, Martin. Yeah. On page 92 in the papers, which is in the first policy, it talks about business late payments, and it mentions an interest rate of 8%.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if that should be updated to reflect the same wording that's in the second policy, which explains that further and says 8% above Bank of England base rate.
That possibly would be one of the check. Yes.
Okay. I've just got two more, if I may, Chair.
Yes, of course, Councillor Pete.
Thank you. A little bit further down on there, Martin, under the customer welfare, etc., on the third paragraph, second line, just a little typo there. I think it should be collecting rather than collect.
Yeah.
And then I think if I could just pick up on that second policy, which I think carries on from what you were saying there in relation to section 12.4. I noticed on the front the date of that policy is like 2016.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And yeah, it was beginning to look to me as well as if some of the appendices, like Appendix 3 with charges and fees, I don't know if they need to be looked at as well. Yeah. And I suppose off the back of that, with that being 7 years ago, I just wondered what the normal review cycle is for these types of policies. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, certainly, as I said before, that particular policy does need to be revised. I think, Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, that they're usually reviewed every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know why this policy wasn't reviewed with, since 2016. As I said, it's a framework. We still use that same methodology, even though figures may have changed. The process is still the same.
If I can.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, just to add, I think this was something corporately we've picked up, that we don't hold a register of all the policies that the council has. We do now. So we have that policy register, and I know Andrew spent a good bit of time updating that for all of the income and awards policies, and as part of that register it has a review date. And we will monitor that then from an EMT perspective as well, to make sure that policies are routinely reviewed, and we know who's responsible for that review and the timescales around that. So we've introduced that quite recently.
Thanks, Jane. So could that review schedule, or that schedule of all the policies, where a committee, a scrutiny committee or governance and audit, has a particular interest in a policy, it would be really helpful if the register that you've just described could identify which committee has a particular interest in that policy, and that the policies come to, when the policies get changed, that the policy document comes to the committee with a short covering paper identifying the changes and explaining why the changes have been made.
Yeah.
So picking up the comments made on these two papers, it would be helpful to have them updated and then brought back and updated in accordance with the notes that have been made during the meeting, and brought back to committee to say, to assure the committee that the updates have been made and these were the changes.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you very much. I think that would be really helpful. Councillor Pete, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to come in again?
It was just one other sort of thought.
Of course. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just one other thought, perhaps consider. Yeah, your point about changes. I wonder if they could come back as track changes.
Yeah, that's a really good. That's a really good idea, because then they're really easy to spot, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on these two policies? Okay, I think we have a way forward to give the committee the necessary assurance going forward. So that's helpful. Thanks very much, Jane, and everyone else involved. Jane, we now move to item 9, which is providing the committee with a report on the duplicate payments in connection with the winter fuel grant.
Yeah, Chair, and again, I'll base this on the assumption that we had at the beginning of the meeting that the report has been read.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the update there, it does show you what's being collected and what still remains outstanding, and we will continue to issue some of the remaining bills to try and recover that or net it off any future grant payments that somebody's entitled to. And we have looked to strengthen the process to avoid this happening again. So there's been some further training and we've looked at different areas. We have, you know, these batches, this happens, the error doesn't happen, but we do have batches rejected and amended and then reloaded. That's something we do routinely. So the majority of the time that runs smoothly, but unfortunately for this one, that it didn't happen quite as we would expect. So we have put those additional measures in place to try and avoid it in the future.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'm going to bring in Councillor Peat first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick question, Jane, is I guess there's one thing telling people what they should do, but there's another thing about having controls built into the system. And is this more about the former rather than the latter, I guess? So we're still potentially got the risk it could happen again.
I think there's always, when you have human intervention in any process, unfortunately, there is always that risk. So we do look to automate and to rule out anything we can to try and avoid that in the future. But there is always that risk. But we will hopefully, with the measures that we've done, we'll really minimise that risk going into the future.
Okay, thank you.
Jane, is there anything in the IT system that could be deployed?
Well, I have asked for something to be looked at, because if there was an error in the batch, would that not have been rejected anyway? So it's something we are looking at a little further to see if there's perhaps another fail-safe that could then be built into that to avoid it. As I said, that's always the best way to correct things, is to avoid them happening in the first place.
Yeah, that's exactly where my thinking was going. Something in the IT system that was a fail-safe, that it just couldn't happen almost, you know, almost regardless of human intervention.
So we will look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And that was exactly one of the things I was going to say in regard to IT. But clearly there are 194 cases still outstanding, you're saying there. And I would suspect that there'll be quite a few of those possibly no longer in business, or with absolutely no intention of repaying this money. So, Jane, would you say that there is, without much doubt, going to be a write-off here for some of this money, that we're not going to recall it all?
I think it's inevitable. There will be a level of write-off. We want to minimise that as much as we can. So obviously we continue to pursue where we can, but that may well be a factor when we finalise this. And for how long do you go on trying to recover it? So yeah, I think that is there. It's noted that in the report, and I can't remember which paragraph, that is a potential, and that will have to go through the normal write-off procedures if we do end up doing that.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham, for your question. Thank you. I'm going to bring in John and then Councillor David. John, are you with us? Right, Councillor David.
Sorry.
Oh, no, he's
I do
here.
apologise.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Yeah, Jane, I was just wondering, there is provision in the documents we have in front of us to put these debts out to an agency. Is it worth doing it at this stage, or is it too early?
I think we need to look at it and understand, you know, that it's quite a low level of debt in terms of the individual payments, but we will look at all options before we finalise anything in terms of a write-off.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. I recognise that this is a very unfortunate incident, but I'm pretty confident that we can put remedies in place to ensure that something of this scale doesn't happen again. Obviously, there's always room for human error, unfortunately. But the point I wanted to make is that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the Incomes and Awards team, they've handled thousands of this type of application and claim for about 3 years during the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. So I think they deserve a pat on the back for the amount of work they've done with very, very little extra resource. And I don't think we should lose sight of that fact. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor David, and that is a point well made. And when I think that's an important point to be noted in the minutes, that the team has actually worked incredibly hard and made an impact, especially over the past 3 years. So yes, we'll make sure we record that in the minutes, please. Jane?
Just to quickly come back in, I just want to highlight the error actually happened within our creditors team, so it wasn't within the Income and Awards team. I'm sure Martin would want me to set the record straight in terms of that, so I just wanted that noted as well. But of course, every payment that the Income and Awards team have made has gone through creditors as well. So you know, yeah, the same applies. But I just wanted to be clear on that.
Just be clear, yeah. Thanks, Jane. Thanks for that clarification. And thank you for bringing the paper and allowing the committee to have an opportunity to discuss the error. Moving on, if there are no further questions, we are going to take the risk deep dives, agenda item 10. We're going to take them as our final item. So I'm going to move us for now to item 11, which are our working group feedback reports. Colleagues will remember that we have established 4 working groups. The internal audit working group has not met yet. The plan is that it will meet in April for its initial meeting. And you have in your pack the update reports, feedback reports from the HOUPS working group, the Highways working group and the Capital working group. I'm not proposing to ask anyone to talk to these update reports, but to open the floor for any comments or any questions that members have in connection with the update reports. Okay, no questions. And I think going forward, this is the first time we've had these feedback reports. And as we go forward, we intend every meeting to have the reports come so that those members who are not on a particular working group have the opportunity to see what the working group is doing and where it's focusing its energies. But as I said, we have only just started in this journey and these are the very first reports. So I'll just pause in case there are any comments. Nope, thank you. And we'll continue to bring these update reports in the spirit of transparency and shared information. Agenda item 12 is a feedback report, an oral update from Gareth Hall, who's our formal member of finance panel, but I don't think Gareth's here today.
He's not, Chair. Last conversation I had with Gareth that he was going to do verbal reports because I asked him to send a written one.
Right, okay, well what we'll do is we'll record Gareth's apologies and we'll have an update from him in due course.
Okay, that's fine.
At the next meeting. Agenda item 13 is our forward work programme. When is there anything in particular that you want us to, or you would like to comment on there? It seems to me to be shaping up.
Nothing at all from memory, Chair, on that.
Mm-hmm.
I put the dates in, I think I put the dates in. Yes, I did at the very end for next year. And I've actually planned next year. I've tried to space them out slightly differently based on what's happened this year.
Yeah.
So I've added one in January, but I think you've got 8 for the year now.
Right, okay, now that's helpful because I think in fairness we have had to schedule more than than we originally anticipated. And just picking up the earlier comment in connection with internal audit, can you just make sure that we have approval of the internal audit plan at our Q4 meeting, so that we hit the ground with an approved plan from the 1st of April 2024.
Will do, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we will move to our risk deep dives, which is agenda item 10. We have 2 deep dives, one on the Welsh Community Care Information System and one on social care provider failure. And these deep dives have been drawn from the strategic risk register, where we felt as a committee that we wanted to go into a couple of the risks in more depth. I anticipate that colleagues, officers leading the discussion of these risks may feel the need during the course of the discussion to move into discussion of items or issues which are confidential and sensitive. It may also be that members of the committee will wish to ask questions that are confidential and sensitive in connection with these 2 risks. I am proposing that we cover as much as we possibly can of our risk deep dives in public session, which is entirely appropriate. However, I'm also proposing, and Wynne will help us out with a resolution shortly, that where there are items of confidential or sensitive material in connection with these risks, that the committee will go into closed session to have a conversation with officers about those items. We'll do as much as we can, please, in public session, but we will go into closed session towards the end of the discussion of these risks, where there are confidential or sensitive matters to be discussed. Wynne, is that okay?
That's fine, Chair. I think what I would say is let's do both the deep dives in public as much as we can possibly do, and then hold all the questions that are going into the confidential session, so we only pass the resolution once and close the session down at the very end.
Perfect, perfect, Wynne. Yeah. So Wynne, would you like to give us the wording of the resolution and then members can vote on it, please?
I'll do that at the appropriate time, Chair.
Right, okay.
I've got it
do
ready.
That. All right, we'll do that at the when we go immediately before, not
exactly.
now. Right, okay,
not
apologies.
now.
Thank
So
you very much.
We do it later. So at the moment, you've got the items from the risk register, which I've sent out with the agenda. The director, Nina Davis, is here together with Rachel from the team to actually look at both these items. I think they're intending to do a presentation. Chair.
Fine, that's perfect. Okay, so I'm handing over to Nina and the team. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much. I'm Nina Davis, the Interim Director of Social Services and Housing. We've been invited here this afternoon to give the committee the opportunity to have a deep dive into the Welsh Community Care Information System, or otherwise known as WCIS. I've got Rachel along with me here today, who's prepared a brief presentation for you. And yes, as already been discussed, we might need to then go into confidential session to be able to discuss in more detail, but happy to cover that later on. Thank you very much, Chair. Okay to hand over to Rachel.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Issa. I'm the Strategic Business and Programme Manager for Children's Services. I have put together a brief presentation, so I'll just share my screen with you now. Sorry, I'm not as used to Zoom as I am Teams. Has that come up? Okay. Oh.
Just coming up now, Rachel. That's it.
There we go. Thank you very much. There we go. Okay, so there's just a brief history on WCCIS there. So WCCIS is our social services online database. And the aim is to help our staff manage their caseloads on a day-to-day basis, and essentially an online file sharing site. The key functionality is to share information across care services and enable joint case management. Also supports kind of our county-wide teams. So, you know, a social worker in our North team can access the same file as perhaps our intervention and prevention workers in the South. So it's been introduced in, well, it was introduced into social services in June 2017, and we're currently in contract until the 2nd of December 2024. At the moment, there's 17 live organisations on WCCIS, so that includes 15 councils and 3 health boards. That does include our Powers Teaching Health Board as well. There have been some challenges to overcome since implementation, and because of those challenges, that led to several reviews, both externally and internally. The most recently was in November 21, where BetterGov completed an internal review, and then Channel 3 undertook an external review, which resulted in the National Improvement Plan. Okay, so there are some strengths of WCCIS. One of the positives is that we've now been using it for 5 years, and there's more than 1,000 users. The national team are currently working with advanced and live organisations. That includes our local authorities and health boards to implement an improvement plan to look at the challenges that I mentioned in the previous slide. It does have the ability for a shared system with Powers Teaching Health Board and other Welsh authorities as well. And because now we've had it for 5 years, there's limited costs for training and support. So we have implemented our own internal training videos. So all that training for new starters is done online. So the costs associated with that are quite small. We also have a really skilled and experienced WCCIS team who are really helpful in kind of overcoming user issues, providing experience, finding ways of us doing things better on the system, always finding new ways of us doing things as well. And also our business intelligence reporting is in place as well. So we are able to pull information from WCCIS into our performance reports on Insight and Power BI. And then WCCIS were quite well established in creating our own forms. So our assessments and visits, everything like that, we can tailor to our needs on WCCIS and design and update them as our processes update as well. So those are our strengths. And then unfortunately, there are some risks at the moment. One of the, well, yes, it's quite an extensive list at the moment, but there are periods of downtime for WCCIS. They happen unplanned and have been happening frequently, which leaves the service without access to live files and information. As we have moved completely away from paper-based files, everything is stored on WCCIS. So that means all the updated information on the child, on the family, any history. So when it goes down, that leaves our workers without access to any of that information. When it is working, there are still periods of poor performance, so it can still crash, it can be slow to load, you get error messages, sometimes things don't save properly, so that also causes issues as well. And we have had quite a few reports of where WCCIS has lost information or including entire assessments and case notes on children's files. I talked earlier about we have been able to set up our business intelligence reporting, things like that, but unfortunately there is a lack of being able to do that within WCCIS itself. So WCCIS isn't able to prompt workers, for example, that they have a visit due or an assessment that's overdue. And that all has to be pulled out of WCCIS into one of our insight reports. We have experienced that WCCS is actually unable to manage the volume of storage needed for some of our children and young people. We have been using WCCS for 5 years now. Unfortunately, we do have children that have been known to us for even longer than that. Some of our children looked after, for example, and some children with quite high complex needs, which means there's quite a lot of information that we have to store on their files. For example, some of our children in our residential homes have daily recordings depending on the shift changes. And what we found recently is that we had issues being able to update their information because WCCS wouldn't allow us to store any more information on their files. Although we've been using WCCS for 5 years, some of the functionalities still haven't been implemented or took years to implement. The chronology function that was one of the key selling points for WCCS, we've only been able to use effectively as of last year. There was also supposed to be finance integration, and that element still isn't live. So we're still not able to use WCCS and its functionalities to the full advertised system. We also, one of the risks is that there's no ability to access WCCS through a smartphone or tablet. So when our workers are out and about and they need to access that information, they can't at the moment. You have to be on a laptop connected to the network. Again, that was one of the things that was in the original specification, but has not materialized, or we've not been able to use it. And also I mentioned earlier that there is the ability for cross-working and working with Powers Teaching Health Board. However, that has also not materialized. So WCCS has that ability, but it's not in practice at the moment. One of the key elements of that is the information sharing protocols around that. And I've just popped at the bottom there that it is a retention risk for our staff. We really struggle at the moment with social worker retention. And in our exit interviews, it is highlighted as one of the main issues that they have. And I would say there's quite strongly comments about it as well, and how it impacts to people that are already incredibly under pressure and how it adds to their workload. Yeah, and one of the surveys that we've undertaken with staff about what they least like working in children's services, it was highlighted that WCCS was one of those issues. And then the last one there, just put about accessibility issues as well. So WCCS is not easy for people with visual impairments. It also doesn't have the ability to be in the Welsh language either. So those are some of those are the kind of the overarching risks. I will say that quite often we're having to risk plan around very specific issues. But here on this slide, I've just put some of the kind of general things that we're trying to do to help with that risk. And one of those is that, like our WCCS team that I mentioned, and our DQCs, who are our data quality coordinators within Children's Services itself, they have a kind of live chat between themselves. So as soon as one worker spots something, that's almost reported straight away. So if it does go down, they'll say, oh, has WCCS gone down for me? Or is that everyone? And it's quick then to be reported and communicated. Any issues with WCCS, any downtime, any reported issues of periods of slowness, that is sent out in comms to all users. And then we've also downloaded, so as I mentioned earlier, we can have forms and assessments and visits on WCCS, but we have Word versions of those forms, so that if, because our frontline staff's time is so precious that they quite often will block out, like, right, this afternoon I'm going to catch up with my writing up of visits and assessments, and then what will happen is WCCS will go down and then they'll struggle to find that time again. So what we've done is have Word versions of those forms, so at least they can get their typing up done. They're then passed to our admin team, who then input them on the system when the system goes live then. We also have a business gateway group for WCCIS, which is key. Well, it's a mixture of people. It's people within children's services, adult services, our business intelligence team, and WCCIS. And during that, we'll discuss prioritization of jobs that have been logged about WCCIS. We'll get updates from the national team about issues. And then if they are locally reported issues, then we'll discuss in that group whether it needs to be escalated any further. We encourage all of our users, any issue that they have, anything that's not working incorrectly, that every single time that they log that as a job with WCCIS, so that we can pull reports and look at patterns, and that's a constant full picture of what's happening on WCCIS. And then, yeah, at the bottom there, I've just outlined that quite often we have very specific issues with WCCIS. So we do have project teams that will meet to look at that, a plan around those issues that aren't covered by these other actions. And that's kind of a summary of the issues at the moment and the strengths of WCCIS as well. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions.
Oh, hi, thanks very much, Rachel. That was, I don't know where to start, actually. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, very, very clear, very, very candid. Don't know where to start. I'll start with John and then Councillor William.
Well, as presented, it's a dreadful litany, isn't it? I'm just wondering, are things improving, or are we reaching a point of despair here?
I think there have been, oh, go on, Nina, sorry.
No, sorry, Chair, if I may. I spent quite a lot of time talking to staff about WCCIS. The feedback I've been getting is that things are significantly improved than where they were. That the national team and the steps that have been taken, you know, where there has been improvements, but there still remains frustrations with performance of the national system. So, you know, that I think the risk, the fact that the inherent and the residual risk are both the same, kind of reflects that we've done all that we can, we're feeding all that we can to the national team, but a lot of solving the issues are outside of the control of us within Powys County Council and the team without Powys County Council. So that just explains why the risk and the residuals are the same. But you know, the frustrations remain, but I don't know of any computer system or data management system where there aren't frustrations. But yeah, there is definite frustration among the staff about the system. But Rachel, sorry, you know, if you'd like to come in and add anything, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that I think the periods of downtime, there are less reports of those. WCCIS are coming through and saying that has improved. And I would say the teams that we've mentioned before, we are quite experienced now with WCCIS. And I think we, when issues have arisen, we have been able to find workarounds for that. But like Nina said, we have been limited on occasion where we have had to go escalate things to the national team, and then been limited in how we've been able to manage that locally.
Thanks very much, Nina and Rachel. Before I ask John if he wants to come in again, then go to Councillor William and then Councillor Ange, could you just clarify what is the national team? Who and what is that, and where do they reside? What is their governance? Who do they belong to? Who are they?
So WCCIS is a Welsh government-led system. It's for use across all of Welsh authorities. So I don't know the exact details about the governance, if I'm honest, but yeah, the national team are linked to our Welsh government.
So are they Welsh government civil servants, or do they sit somewhere else?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure of the
No.
detail of that.
Right, okay, I'll leave that one for just now. Thanks very much, Rachel. John, just checking if you wanted to come back in and before
I think I might be tending towards the confidential end if I
Okay,
extend
right, can
any
you hold
further.
on to that, John, then?
I've just
for
hold the
question?
thought, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. I'll go to Councillor William and then Councillor Ange after Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much to Rachel and to Nina for speaking to this, particularly to Rachel for the candor and detail of her report. I mean, one of the most alarming aspects of the risks and the negative sides of what's been revealed in the presentation is the impact on staff well-being, staff job satisfaction, and staff retention, because it's every colleague is such a precious resource, particularly in the current situation with regard to recruitment and so on. I just wanted to ask again, this may be a question beyond the scope of colleagues currently on this call, but on this meeting, but to what extent are these problems that we face here in Powys specific to issues around the strength of signal, strength of our digital infrastructure that would be less impacted maybe on the M4 corridor and the A5 corridor and so on? I'm just interested as to whether or not we are disproportionately suffering the disbenefits of this system, because I'm sure you have a significant, maybe through WLGA or through your own social service networks, Pan Wales, you have regular contact with colleagues elsewhere. Are they experiencing this in the fullness of the challenges, or are we at the really at the sharp end of some of these issues where the resilience of the system seems to be almost at a critical level, really, in terms of its ability to do the job that we needed to do for us?
Yeah, so on, Nina.
No, carry on, Rachel.
So I was just going to say, so the digital transformation team, we're undertaking investigations into all of the jobs logged in relation to WCCIS and whether they were local issues or whether they're national issues. And if they are local, is that down to our infrastructure? One of the slight difficulties with that investigation was that Powys were one of the first local authorities to take on WCCIS, and in terms of our form development and how we're using the system, we're quite ahead of most other local authorities. So the volume that we're using in comparison to others is much higher. So I think when it comes to the impact on our IT systems, it's much different to some other local authorities. But yeah, as I've said, the digital transformation team, we're investigating that further.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. Councillor Ange.
Part of it was similar to what William has just asked, and yes, thank you very much for a very candid report, which I'm glad that we've had so much detail and that we know exactly a lot more what's going on. I feel a lot more confident in what's going on because we've had this. First one was to do with the health board. Is it a systems failure between us and the health board and WCCIS, or is it a person's failure? Because very often us and the health board don't always work very well together. And the other one was, is this pattern of letdowns across the whole of Wales, or is this mostly with us? Do we know if it's a CCIS problem across all of Wales, really? Those were my two. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ange. I do have feedback from around Wales that I don't believe this is just a Powys issue and frustration with the system. I'll just ask Rachel to confirm that in a second, if that's okay. But Chair, I would suggest that perhaps we then consider moving into confidential session. If I may, I know we've got another deep dive coming up next on providers. I would suggest that that entire item is taken in confidential session. The presentation we've prepared would be appropriate to be so. So if that would be all right, Chair, I would put that forward as a suggestion.
Thank you very much, and Nina. I will be guided by you. The social care provider failure item could I'm assuming includes some items linked to sort of commercial sensitivity as well as social services sensitivity. So I think that's entirely appropriate. Thank you, colleagues, for the discussion so far. I'm going to ask Wynne to enable us through resolution to move to private session.
Thank you, Chair. The resolution that I'm going to ask you to pass is to resolve to exclude the public for the following items of business on the grounds that there will be disclosure to them of exempt information in the category 3 of the local authorities access to information variation Wales Orders 2007.
Thank you very much, Wynne.
So
Would someone like to support that? Councillor William?
Yeah.
I just wish to either propose, or if you've already proposed it, Chair, to second it, because completely understand on the occasions I've raised issues around this, they are extremely sensitive and are not appropriate for wider discussion just at this time for obvious reasons.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Second.
Yeah, second for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Seconded. Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. Wynne, if you could now move us to private session to continue.
Okay, bear with me, Chair.